In August 2024, Israel's genocide in Gaza had reached a state of frenzy. Over 40,000 people had been killed by Israeli bombs, drones, and bullets at that point. A number so high that Palestinians were forced to bury corpses in gardens, streets, and graves stacked one on top of the other. On the 10th of that month, Israel attacked the Al Tabeen school in eastern Gaza City with 3 rocket strikes, a site housing hundreds of displaced Palestinians, including many children. Save the Children called it the deadliest attack on a school since the beginning of Israel's assault on the Strip, with at least 80 people reported dead and dozens more injured. Many of those not killed in the initial blast were trapped inside the destroyed building as fire spread, with severe burn victims overwhelming hospitals nearby. At the end of August 2024, Gaza's health ministry published a 649-page document listing all of the identified dead in Gaza to that point, including at least 11,355 minors. It took over 108 pages just to record the names of those killed who were under 16. That's the grisly, violent, and criminal context in which a wave of direct actions against branches of Barclays Bank took place that summer. They followed a report by War on Want and the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign into Barclays' financial links to companies like Elbit Systems, Raytheon, and Caterpillar, all known to have provided the Israeli military with the means to carry out its genocide in the Strip. At the time, Barclays said that it provided financial investment to legitimate parts of the defense sector, supplying products to NATO and its allies, and that decisions about arms embargoes were the responsibility of elected governments. But in October 2024, it was reported that Barclays no longer held any shares in Elbit Systems, having allegedly held over $3.4 million worth of shares just 6 months earlier. Amongst the branches damaged that summer was a Barclays bank in Burnley. The action there involved spray painting red paint over the branch's storefront, as well as the Barclays logo. Windows and doors were also damaged. Apparently, that's what passes for terrorism in Britain these days. Last month, Brendan O'Hagan, Amanda Kelly, Mira Atkinson, Mohammed Malik, and 70-year-old Alma Yaniv were found guilty of causing damage worth an alleged £212,000 to that branch. That image you just saw a moment ago, the video, the B-roll, that apparently is several £100,000 worth of damage. That verdict was handed down by a jury in Preston Crown Court, but unknown to them and also unknown to the defendants, the judge wanted to go further than sentencing them as mere lawbreakers. The 5 now face being sentenced as terrorists after the judge declared his intention to consider a terrorist connection in the case. A reminder, this is for paint and broken windows. Last month, 4 Palestine Action activists involved in an action at Elbit's site in Filton near Bristol became the first ever defendants convicted of criminal damage to be sentenced as terrorists. As we've already reported, the jury in that case was prevented by court order from knowing about the possibility that the defendants could be treated as terrorists while they considered their verdicts. The wider country was also prevented from knowing this fact, also by court order. That ruling, made by Mr. Justice Johnson, resulted in lengthy custodial sentences for the 4. And when the Preston judge, Philip Parry, asked prosecution and defence lawyers for submissions on whether there was a terrorist connection in this case, he attached Justice Johnson's ruling. The Guardian has reported this on what happened next. Responding to Parry, the CPS argued that the Barclays 5 should be sentenced as terrorists. That's the Crown Prosecution Service, despite prosecutors having not raised the possibility before or during the trial. The Guardian understands the CPS is arguing that the terrorist connection only came to light from admissions made by the defendants at trial, including relating to their affiliation to Palestine Action, and that the protest was part of a wider campaign by Palestine Action against Barclays. Given Palestine Action, again, not a prescribed group at the time, claimed responsibility for the action, that's somewhat difficult to believe. The news of this latest move by our courts to class people who do direct action protests as terrorists has caused widespread outrage. Labour MP John McDonnell said this: "Trying direct action protesters under criminal law, but then sentencing them under terrorist legislation cannot be seen in any way as fair or just. It is a practice that seems to be specifically targeted to silence the voices of people speaking out against the genocide in Gaza." McDonnell is not wrong about the special targeting. Under the law, an act has a terrorist connection if it causes serious damage to property, is aimed at influencing the government or intimidating a section of the public, and is made to advance a political cause. Terrorism, you'd think, is about creating a sense of terror within the wider population. There's no details about what serious means in terms of property damage, but the definition is so wide it seems to pull in all kinds of direct action, which is, of course, always designed to influence the government and to advance a political cause. But not all causes appear to be treated equally. In 2021, Extinction Rebellion activists shattered the windows of Barclays headquarters in Canary Wharf. Remember that? That was in protest at the corporation's financial involvement in fossil fuel extraction. 7 protesters were found guilty of causing criminal damage amounting to £500,000 2 years later in 2023, yet none faced jail, and a connection of terrorism was never even mentioned. Palestine Action was prescribed as a terror organisation last summer in 2025. But in the considerations made by then Home Secretary Yvette Cooper to ban the group, the action against the Burnley branch of Barclays was not used as evidence of terrorism. So even she and her advisors don't seem to have believed this action met the threshold for terrorism, which, of course, to any sensible person, it doesn't. Earlier today, I was joined by Amanda Kelly, one of the defendants in the Burnley Barclays case. I began by asking her how she felt when she learned that the judge was considering a terror connection in her case.
I was very surprised. I still am very surprised. It's not fully sunk in, or I don't know if it'll ever sink in. But I mean, we were convicted of criminal damage. That was what we were on trial for. That's what we were convicted for. There was never any hint or suggestion that this might happen until a week or so after the trial had finished.
So there was never any sort of conversation around this happening with your legal representatives at any point?
No, not at all. Not until, a week after, when the judge emailed our barristers and the prosecution barrister as well, asking for submissions, quoting Judge Johnson's sentencing of the Fulton Four. So he asked for submissions as to whether they believe that he should or shouldn't apply this same sentencing guideline.
When the Fulton verdict came through, did you ever imagine the same procedure would apply to your case?
Everyone was shocked that this dangerous precedent had been set, that property damage could be considered as terrorism. But still, I don't think anyone can imagine it happening to yourself. It's wild.
There was always a different dimension with the Fulton case, which was more overtly political because of the targeting. So there was never a sort of conversation about how that case was being treated, and over time, people thinking, actually, maybe we might be in for a surprise here. Was that never talked about with, for instance, your legal representatives?
They were definitely as shocked as we were. It was never mentioned. I mean, the judge was aware of it happening in the background, but it was never suggested that it could also be applied to our case in any way.
On the property damage, the scale of it, you're said to have caused £212,000 worth of damage. Do you know where that figure comes from? And what is it meant to apply to? Because, £212,000 is a lot of money. When it's a manufacturing plant and when it's weapons, you can understand why large numbers are involved. When it's a facility like the one you targeted, somewhat less so. So where does it come from, that figure?
I believe it was replacing the windows. Cost that much money, which is, they were some expensive windows.
It's increasingly common for defendants in direct action cases such as yours to be restricted in their defences. The judges now prevent people from saying why they did what they did to the jury. Did that happen in your case?
It didn't. So we were, it was agreed between prosecution and our barristers, the defence barristers, and the judge, that we were allowed to use our defences in giving evidence. And then the judge made his ruling after we'd given evidence, and ruled that we had no lawful excuse. So all our defences were then removed, which did confuse the jury a little bit, because they'd heard us talk about why we did what we did, and then were told to dismiss that, essentially.
If the judge finds a terror connection at your sentencing in a number of weeks from now, in early September, what will that mean for you?
I would be deemed a terrorist, and that would have major implications for sentencing. I mean, the prospect of going to prison would be unavoidable, and it would affect the rest of my life, essentially. But I mean, the reason that I decided to take direct action was watching these atrocities live streamed coming through on my phone every single day. I'm being completely just devastated by that, and realizing that, there's people that have the power to stop this, and they're not stopping this. That became like evident. And so for me, I needed to bypass these people who clearly, the world wasn't doing anything to stop this. The reality was that our action was against a corporate property owned by a corporation that was financing and enabling genocide and these atrocities that were happening in Gaza. And so by taking action against Barclays, we wanted to cost the company more than they made in profits from investing in Elbit systems. When we talk about terrorism, and it's like, where's the terror in this? This action was never against people. It was an attempt to stop people being terrorized in Palestine, and an attempt to, stop the financial enabling of this happening. Personally, I couldn't understand how the world was continuing as normal when this was happening.
Really, really powerful testimony there. It's a truly extraordinary suggestion by the courts that breaking some windows and spraying some paint is anything like terrorism. As you know, we've reported extensively on Palestine Action and the extreme reaction of the Starmer government to the group. And we'll keep going. So don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. I'm not going to make excuses for the state with the Filton 4, but you can understand why, and I don't agree with it before people go crazy, but you can understand why the state, a liberal democratic state or an autocratic state, would start to get panicky when people attack military installations or arms companies. This was just a high street bank and windows broken and paint was thrown at it. I mean, it's so fundamentally different. And it's precisely the sort of thing we've seen again and again and again with protests. You don't have to like it. And they're not all left-wing protests, right? The Countryside Alliance did similar stuff. Field protests in the late 1990s. You Can Cut, I presume now, in 2026, could be subject to punitive responses. You're quite a calm guy on Novara Media, right? Sometimes people come to all kinds of conclusions. We say, this is crazy, this is assault on democracy. You go, well, hold on, there's context, there's background. This does seem...
This is crazy.
Utterly extraordinary.
Yeah, this is utterly extraordinary. And I do think this is an example of, like, the Israel lobby just really infiltrating British law, right? Because, like, there is no reason whatsoever to call this terrorism other than to just chill Palestine protest. Because this was before it was, obviously, I disagree with the prescription of Palestine Action, but once it's prescribed, if you smash up a bank in the name of Palestine Action, then obviously the judge is going to, charge you.
That's internally coherent, right?
It makes sense.
Yeah.
But this was before it was a terrorist organization, and now because they wanted to influence? Because what the judge seemed to do with the Filton lot, and as you say, it looked like visually it was very different, right? The footage of the Filton crew in the arms factory, like it was distressing at times.
It was visually arresting, right?
It was visually arresting.
Wow,
You're like,
this is
whoa, okay.
You don't see that very often, do you?
Yeah, and there was someone harmed, that female police officer, right? So you could see how there was an argument. Again, I disagree with it. I don't think they should have been done for terrorism. I think it was criminal damage. And then there's a question about GBH or whatever. But this, like smashing up a bank with some spray paint, that is like the most bog standard kind of form of direct action that we've had in this country for forever. And obviously, yes, it's a crime. It's criminal damage. Like no one's going to object if you try them for criminal damage. Like maybe you'll get a jury who are like, well, no, actually, we think they're right. There was a greater harm that they were trying to prevent, but that probably won't happen, and no one's going to be outraged if these people get tried for criminal damage. But to call this terrorism is crazy. I mean, the ones where I was a bit more sober was sort of the Just Stop Oil demonstrations, where they ended up getting a bit harsher on the protesters, and sort of, I thought that was in a way responding to public pressure, which was that the public saw that this kept happening. Protesters had worked out that by sort of breaking some minor crimes, you could cause quite a lot of disruption. So the government came in and said, okay, we're going to make these crimes a bit more major because people are really pissed off. That was where I was sort of less on the side of people saying this is crazy authoritarianism. Obviously, I've got lots of sympathy with the protesters, and I hope none of them go to jail or anything like that. But there seemed like a non-sinister explanation for the government sort of moving the goalposts. Here, this just seems like crazy Israel lobby trying to protect a foreign government kind of stuff. I don't think there's any other explanation. That this is not responding to public opinion in any way whatsoever.
No,
There's nothing democratic about this.
I think even most reform voters would say this isn't terrorism. Because I don't know about, maybe the MPs would, but not the voters. I mean, look, if we had Novara Towers and somebody threw a brick through the window and they spray painted something awful, I mean, that's terrible. That's terrible, right? I wouldn't want that to happen to us. But again, I don't think anybody would say it's terrorism.
Mm.
And you said it's criminal damage. We also have another charge in English law, which is violent disorder, right? Which is very serious. It's 5 years in prison, right? I've been charged with violent disorder before because I took things too far on a protest, right? So I was charged with violent disorder, and the solicitor says, "Well, this is a very serious charge. You could face 5 years." Well, bloody hell, it wasn't that bad. Yeah, you may also not get a custodial sentence. It's very wide range, and that's the point because it's often used with political. It's used with political protesters.
I've been found guilty of aggravated trespass.
There you go.
Which I did. I did do aggravated trespass. But if after the event that had got called terrorism, then that could have ruined my life. So that's the other thing I really have sympathy for these. Well, obviously I have sympathy for these people on loads of different metrics.
Yeah.
But the fact that when they did these, because when you do direct action, you know that you know
the risks.
You know the risks.
Yeah.
Right. So you think, well, I know that I might do community service, or I might get a fine, or there might be I
might do 3 months inside for violent disorder. Worst case.
But if you do an action and then after the fact it gets twisted into something, there's no way these people could have guessed that this was going to get reclassified as terrorism. Like if someone there had said, oh, what if they call this terrorism? Someone would say, you're paranoid, that's crazy. The people have been smashing bank windows for forever. Yes, it's a crime, but you're not going to go to prison for a long time.
But also the whole post facto element of this, the Colston statue in Bristol, you can get, I think it was great, right? It was a really important cultural moment in this country. Those are the moments that make a nation, right? Whatever your politics. And sometimes you think it's good, sometimes you think it's bad, but it was an iconic moment, right? You could say it's criminal damage, you can say it's violent disorder. But imagine if post facto those people were charged with terrorism.
Terrorism, yeah.
I mean, it seems obscene, and it's just completely contrary to any basic principles of justice.
And again, the whole principles of justice is you're supposed to know what laws you might be convicted of when you commit said crime. And it is like moving the goalposts afterwards, I just think it's against our sense of natural justice in this country.
Obviously not. Although I should say, look, the Terrorism Act, the post-2000 legislation, which is getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and some of this stuff relates to updates in 2020, 2021, it just should be struck off the books. It's absurd. And you're right, I think it's coming from the Israel lobby. And the idea that I just think, we're looking at a world where basically anything could be categorized now as terrorism. I think we're going to get to a point where post facto speech acts might become terrorism. If you shout something at somebody, you bastard, F off, excuse my language, but I'm just giving a strong example. Again, you might think I'm being ridiculous. Well, this sounds ridiculous. We're here. And finally, on the point of putting people in prison, Michael, we've got Andy Burnham just last week saying we're going to stop early release because the people that killed PC Andrew Harper, I think they were sentenced to 15 years, one of them, and 2 for 13 years. Those 2 for 13 years were going to get out after 7. He died in a horrendous, gruesome way. They'd be up for early release, and Andy Burnham trying to be, a good politician and doing the right thing, I think, saying no, they shouldn't be up for early release. And meanwhile, we're potentially sticking people in prison for really long stretches for spray paint and smashing windows. It's crazy. It's not serious. It's not a serious way to carry on.